Hello, and welcome to She Reads Monthly Podcast, where we interview women writers and authors' books. My name is Laura Foley, and I'm your host. Our podcast today features Karen Katz and her book of Getting Sauced. For the past 30 years, Karen Katz has been a multi-award-winning television executive producer, showrunner, and writer with over 1,500 hours of programming under her belt. Her work has appeared on Food Network, Discovery Network, HBO, Family, WETA, BBC, NHK, Nickelodeon, Lifetime, PBS, and Fox International. From behind the camera, she has witnessed and taste tested the delectable creations of some of the world's most beloved chefs. Her work has taken her from the comfort of her Brooklyn home, which she shares with her husband, to the far reaches of Europe and Asia. She is a passionate home cook and very proud of her lobster risotto. For more information, travel stories, and great recipes idea, visit her website at thekatzdales.com or follow her on Instagram at The Cat's Tales or on Facebook at The Cat's Tales. So there's several different ways that you can get more information about her. You can, find great recipes, more so than what's already in the book. And there's a lot of information she can share. And so it's definitely worth the time, to check it out and just to, see everything and kind of get a kind of more than just a feast for your eyes in a sense. Now, Karen, if you could possibly tell us about your book.
Sure. Well, hi, Laura. It's so nice to be here with you today.
Nice to have you.
Thank you. And it's called Getting Sauced. I'll hold it up too. How I learned everything I know about food from working in TV. And it's really a story, memoir about my life in food. I grew up the daughter of a woman who hated to cook and who only had 3 spices in her cabinet. And, somehow I ended up being the executive producer of one of the country's most beloved cooking shows. So it's really a story about my life and how I got there, but also a lot of dish behind the scenes about really what it takes to put on a food show.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. I mean, it was really a pleasure to write it. I have some wonderful memories of my time working with Emeril and all the other chefs on Food Network. So during COVID, I actually the book was an idea in my head for a long time. And I finally had the time to actually sit down and write it.
And just a quick question. Would you say that one of your mom's 3 favorite spices was Lipton onion soup mix?
Well, actually, no. Her favorite spices were salt, pepper, and paprika. But the Lipton onion soup mix is what she used to baste chicken. That mixed with orange juice. That was her secret
her
recipe.
Go-to recipe.
Her go-to, yeah. It was challenging.
Yeah, that's true. What did you hope to achieve by writing this book?
It's a very good question. Part of it was my own journey into kind of a new phase of my career as a writer. The other part was it was just, people would always ask me whenever I would go to a party, they would always ask me when they found out what I did, they wanted to know all the dirt about what happens behind the scenes. And people always seem so fascinated by it. And some of the stories are really quite priceless. So I thought, why not? Maybe people would enjoy reading it. Times like these, you could use a little good laugh.
True. Yes, and it was definitely, there was a lot of great stories in your book and a lot of laughs. And there were some really heartfelt ones too, where I was like, oh my gosh, it's like when it's coming to an end. And I was like very sad because I've been enjoying the whole ride. And then all of a sudden you realize that, well, it's time to go home, the park is closing, whatever. There's no more ride on the roller coaster or whatever, and you're kind of like, oh, wow, and on to something new. So definitely I was engrossed in the book. And then I admit for a moment there, I was like, oh my God, it's ending. But it didn't really end because you did move on to, to other things too and bigger and better things.
Yes, I mean, and not to have a spoiler alert, but the book sort of ends where I am going on the next adventure, which is, well, I don't want to say because I don't want to ruin it for people, but that's what my second book's going to be about. So,
Well, I definitely look forward to reading that one because this one was definitely a great read. If you haven't bought it, it was like a 2-day read, but it was, you know what, there was so much information and stuff going on that I found I didn't want to put it down because I wanted to know what was going to happen next. What was going to be the next recipe? Where were you going to go? Who were, what was
that's
Emeril going to do? Because he is, I never realized, like, just from watching him on television that he's quite the character and he can really play the role and push that envelope, and I wonder if sometimes it didn't make you really nervous,
it
when
absolutely did. I mean, he was really kind of a live wire at times.
yeah,
He really had a way of just getting to the edge of what was okay and what wasn't okay.
yes,
But he really didn't like to stop. When we were taping, we would tape what they call live to tape, which means you basically are doing it live and you don't stop for mistakes or whatever. And he hated to lose that momentum. So I always had the knowledge that I could edit something if he went over the edge a little too much. But so I would let it ride, and let him have a good time, because I did stop him. This is actually not in the book, but I did stop him once. He was making popcorn for some reason and it burnt and it really looked terrible on camera. So I stopped down, we stopped and, it's in front of the whole audience, and he was not happy with me. And he said, I would have fixed it. I would have figured out a way. And I'm sure he would have. And it really taught me a lesson. But the whole rest of the show, just his timing got off and, he just wasn't very happy. So you have to think of these chefs also, they're performers, and the energy it takes to work in front of a camera and to kind of, in his thought process, how he's going to explain what he does. If you stop that, it really kind of jars things. So it was a good lesson for me to learn, actually.
I was very surprised in one of his more pushing the envelope episodes that he didn't sing the song My Bologna Has a First Name. It's yeah.
That's probably because he knew if he did sing it, I'd have to pay residuals to somebody. So
what was it like climbing the ladder of success with little known chefs who are now the country's top chefs?
It was fun. I mean, people forget, they're people, too. And, there's one chapter where I talk about, it was Food and Wine magazine. Every year they have a food and wine festival in Aspen, and every year they celebrate the top 10 new chefs that Food and Magazine picks. And they're kids, they're really young, and most of them. And they haven't had the exposure. They're not on TV yet, but they have made a name for themselves in their restaurants, wherever they've been working. And so this was the first time that they were being filmed. And some of them now are really, have done really, really well for themselves, like Suzanne Goyne in LA and Rocco DiSpirito and some others. But they were like deers in the headlights, and they were starstruck by the other chefs that were there. So it was really kind of a nice thing to kind of help them along while they were, learning for the first time how to be on television, how to relax. And, it's not as easy as people think.
And did you, now, there was a scene you talk about in your book where you were in Aspen and you were sitting with Roscoe, and then Mr. Spiritu is kind of like, oh my God, look who's here, look who's there. And in his own right, he was really up and coming then. And he does that, eat this, not that. And there was a lot of different things that, he was doing and helping people cook healthier on television. And did you ever find, just like him, that sometimes you will go home and like pinch yourself and go, oh my God, I can't believe I just saw this person or this thing just happened. And it was like so incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, probably the person that really floored all of us was, we once had Julia Child on the show.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was like having the Queen of England stop by. I mean, really, everybody was on their toes, on their best behavior. And it was really a thrill. I mean, it was really towards the end of her life. I mean, she was probably in her late 80s, but she was all there. And, you know, was a huge woman. I mean, very, very tall. And but that voice, you know, I mean, you could not mistake that voice was, you know, was lurching, hello, you know, all of that. So, you know, she was terrific. And but she really didn't care much about us poor production people. She only wanted to meet the cooks in our prep kitchen. And she wanted to talk to them about, you know, where are they going to culinary school and what are they doing? And she was so lovely to them that it was really, you know, when you meet a hero or someone you admire, it's always nice to find out that they're really a good soul. So that was really a thrill.
And that they were, in a sense, where these people are right now, they were once there, instead of just saying, well, you're doing great, and then walking away, and you get the feeling like, wow, you know, I didn't even get to talk to them. They didn't really even see me. The fact that she saw everybody that was working back there, and she wanted to know something about them and give them a little inspiration and hope.
Yeah, that's absolutely. That's exactly what she was trying to do. And she succeeded. I mean, they were on, the whole kitchen staff was on cloud nine.
Yeah, because I remember when that episode was on television and she was working with Emeril, like there was nothing that she would let slip. And she would give a suggestion in sort of a suggestion way, but I think he knew it wasn't a suggestion, it was do it that way.
Absolutely. He had great respect for her. I mean, he really did. I mean, she actually had him on one of her PBS shows early on, you know, when he was just starting out, and they really were very fond of each other. So it was really kind of nice, I think, for him to be able to do it full circle for her.
Yes. Can you share some memories of the meals in your household while growing up?
Oh, growing up. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Sadly, yes, I can. Well, as I mentioned, my mother was not a great cook, and she's been a great sport about me writing about her. So I have to give her credit where credit's due. But you know, she just didn't make anything that tasted good, unfortunately. You know, I mean, I talk a lot in the book about how regimented her cooking was because, you know, she was an artist. So she had other things she had to do. She didn't, you know, feeding her kids was just, you know, an obligation. So she had, you know, Monday night was tuna casserole, Tuesday night was chicken, you know, and it kind of went on from there. But the one thing she actually did, to give her some credit, she loved sweets, and she was not a bad baker. And she had two things she did really, really well. One was a chocolate mousse cake that had lady fingers sort of on the bottom, and then chocolate mousse, and she did it all from scratch. She didn't do chocolate pudding or anything like that. And then another layer of lady fingers, and then fresh whipped cream, which she did fresh. She just did not use the ready whip for this, which was a miracle. And it was really good. Oh, and chocolate sprinkles on top too. And the other thing she made was rugelach. There was a woman who helped her clean the house once a week, a German woman who we called her name was Mrs. Plate. And she was, you know, they were about the same age. And Mrs. Plate was an immigrant. And she brought her the recipe for the rugelach, which is, you know, kind of a Jewish German kind of cooking. And it's a hard dough because it's, you know, cream cheese and butter mixed, but it's really good. And she to this day, you know, she still makes it.
Have you ever thought maybe of like creating like a cookbook where you could take like something with, you know, the sweets, where you take like your mom's 2 recipes and your grandmother, your nana's apple pie, and kind of put those things in, the things that your husband makes? Because I know you had 2 separate kitchens, and his, you know, forte was kind of all the sweeter end of things.
Right. You know, cookbooks are tricky. You know, I actually have taken, I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but I've taken all the recipes from the book, and I made sort of a digital cookbook out of it, with pictures and whatnot. But writing this book in and of itself was really quite a challenge to get it from page to publish. So, for a cookbook, not that I couldn't do it, but that, I'm not a professional chef. And unless this becomes a New York Times bestseller, doing a cookbook might be a bit more than I could, it might too much to chew, or whatever the metaphor is.
I understand that. I guess it's not as easy sometimes as like just writing something and, saying, here, publish this. There's a lot more maybe that goes into it, and I haven't published a book myself. I've had a couple of poems in a book that was published, but so I really can't say that I know all the ins and outs. So I can only, imagine. But
well, the publishing of a cookbook, it's like a production. I mean, you really have to get the food photography done. There's food styling. I mean, it's a whole. I mean, the reason I know is because that's what we did on TV. So it's a whole megillah.
And I can definitely relate. When I was reading about what your mom was cooking and what she did, I thought, God, I can so relate to that because my mom, did some cooking. One of my brothers tells me that my mom cooked. I don't remember her ever cooking, but like we had pot pies one night and my brother could never stop opening the pot pie and looking on the inside and going, you know what this looks like? That Alpo chunky beef time. Maybe we should give it to the dog. And I was like, oh no. And then we thought the Swanson TV dinners with the instant mashed potatoes and a little corn and the 2 pieces of chicken was like, great. And my grandmother, like faithfully once a week, she took us to get a Kentucky Fried Chicken one night. Another night we went out for Chinese food. And then on the weekends, we either had like fish at her house or we go to like a really nice restaurant where I couldn't afford, but we'd have to get dressed up. And so it wasn't until maybe a year or so after my grandmother passed that I found out she hated Chinese food.
Oh, that's funny.
She would take us all the time to get Chinese food because it's what she thought we liked, and she was doing it for us. So it just, kind of makes me laugh. When you think about it, yeah, we had some form of noodle, like a tuna noodle casserole too. And it was like whatever the leftovers were during the week, Saturday morning, that was hash. We'd throw it all together and the Wonder Bread with bologna and mustard that we, at least I had to take every day to school.
Right.
The Wonder Bread.
Well, so, I think people who grew up in the 60s and 70s, I think that's kind of what people ate,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was no, I can definitely say there was no veering away from that.
Right.
But, and then you only hope that, when you watch, like when I used to watch Julia Child on television, I used to say, oh my gosh, and she'd be holding up the chicken by the 2 wings and saying, this is the bird, and I think, oh God, if only my parents would cook something like that, this would be great.
Right.
When you first met Emeril Lagasse, what was your impression of him?
Well, I didn't, when I was called for the job, Food Network wasn't very popular at the time. It was in very few households and it wasn't big, network it is now. And I didn't know who he was. So I had to do a little homework before I went to meet him with him the first time. So I watched some of the shows and, is this guy bamming and, being very charismatic and whatnot. So I expected a larger than life man, when I met him. And we had one of those power breakfasts at a hotel in Manhattan. And he was there and his assistant and my boss and who would become my boss and myself. And he was very quiet. I mean, he was a gentleman and very thoughtful, but he was a very serious guy. And it, kind of took me aback because I wasn't really prepared for that, and he actually didn't speak very much during the whole interview. The other women were kind of going at it and telling me about backstage problems they were having and other issues and what they wanted me to do. as the executive producer. And as we're going through the whole thing, finally at the very end, he says, he only asked me one question. And he said, do you like food? And I said, have you seen my hips? And and he sat back and he smiled, and then I got the call later that night that I got the job.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was really an interesting experience the first time I met him.
Do you think part of them telling you like the problems they were having backstage and the things that they needed help with, that they were hoping that like to find out in advance, like if these kind of things were going to make you panicked, that you'd say no and you'd leave. And the fact that you said, oh no, okay, I can do
Yeah.
this, I can help you with that. They were like, all right, because we had 3 before that panicked and ran. So
Right.
now she gets to eat that croissant, the chocolate croissant with the coffee. And yes, she didn't back down from the challenge. So she's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think they just wanted some assurance, I mean, people
Yeah.
can say anything in an interview, quite frankly, but to me, what they were describing seemed that they just had a very immature staff, or, they were just, because they were such a young network, they couldn't, they couldn't afford necessarily people who had a ton of experience. So they probably had a very young staff, and it's just, all they needed was guidance and, someone who knew what they were doing. So I think, to me, it seemed obvious what they needed. And I think because I was so definitive about it, they probably thought that was a good thing.
Now, what about everything that you did on the job and like reading in the book? There was a lot of stress involved with that. And there was like a lot of chaos with that. And like, what was it about that motivated you and kept you going? Because sometimes, like in your stories, it's like you had 5 minutes to start, and it was like, where was Bobby Flay? Or, you were like getting ready to go, and where was the production crew? And here they were coming in smiling, we're here with their coffee. But it was like you wanted to get started half an hour ago. And what kind of motivated you to keep going?
It's the nature of the business. If you get into television, wherever you are in the food chain, it comes with the territory. I mean, it is a very stressful business. You're always, you're working up to shoot something, you shoot it, and then you're moving on to the next thing. I mean, it's not, for example, it's not like writing a book. It's not that you can go back to something multiple times. There's a lot of money involved, or a lot of people, a lot of logistics. And I suppose the thing that motivates you is the challenge. I think, someone asks you to do the impossible, and which they did many times. And, you try to do it. And, for me, and particularly as I got older, what was satisfying about it was sort of mentoring my team. It's sort of like you're the captain, but you need people, and you need this whole team to come with you. So it's like charging into war together,
Yeah.
and, to make everybody feel a part of it. And so that, you accomplish this impossible task. And then at the end of it, you go, okay, that was cool, or if there are problems, it doesn't always come out perfect, so you have to figure out a way to fix it, or, move on from that. But, there is something satisfying about pulling it off and
Yeah.
being able to do that. So I think that's, and they were good days, I mean, and look, we weren't hurting anybody, it's food, there was a lot of television, reality TV or whatever that, one could question the ethics of, what producers do with, with the contestants and whatnot. But, this didn't hurt anybody, and it brought people a lot of joy. So, when people would come backstage, they were so thrilled to be there and so excited that, that really felt good, that they enjoyed it.
And how did you do it where in like one episode you were like in Hawaii and doing getting the pit ready, and in another episode you were going somewhere else, and it was like each time it had to be something bigger and better, and it was kind of like the audience was expecting it, and the powers that be above you were kind of expecting it, and you really like had to, okay, Emeril, we got to do this. And like you said, there wasn't a chance to do it twice. It was like,
Right.
once everything was set, you just had to go and do. And like when you had the food sent to NASA, like up in the spacecraft, I mean,
Yeah.
that was like, that was such a cool thing that I
Like,
don't think anybody's ever done. But you know, you really had to come up with the something bigger and better to kind of, you know, to keep going forward.
yeah, I mean, it's like, it's really like, well, what have you done for me lately? I mean,
Yeah.
you can't just rest on your laurels and go along. And, the show is on for a long time. So you have to kind of revive it, not just for the audience, but for yourself. Okay, well, we've done this now. What can we do? And Emeril is really good in the moment. So that is one thing I actually didn't have to worry about, because you know, he kept the show going. And it's just for us, we had to, we had to change his environment. I always said that my job was to make the world around him comfortable so he could do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
But in order to make that world comfortable for him, there was an awful lot of work that had to happen. And but we had a great team, and you just get it done. And it's fun to try to find new ways to do something that you've been doing for a long time. It just keeps everything fresh and everybody on their toes.
And how did you do it personally, where like after shows, like everyone was like, okay, we're going out to dinner. And it wasn't just a let's get a quick bite and everybody go home, but it was like, okay, plan to be out for 3.5 hours because there's going to be 4 or 5 courses that were coming and you were expected to try everything and try wines that went with everything. And then, it's getting later and later, you got to get up early. People are still ready to be out there. Your whole crew is still ready to be out there for one more
Right.
wine, one more dessert. And it's like, but you got to get up in the morning.
Yeah, it was hard. I mean, and as the years went on, it did not get easier. So, but you learn to pace. I have a little bit at the end of the chapter about the top 10 tips for how to hang with a chef, because their ability to eat and drink is, mere mortals can't do it. And so, if you try to keep up, you will pay dearly for it. So I learned how to, every other drink, or you drink water, or they think you're drinking a gin and tonic, but it's not. It's really just, tonic. So you find little tricks along the way.
I'm sure that definitely helps,
Yeah.
because God, it must have been like sometimes eating all that food and then going home and knowing that,
Yep.
okay, now I've got to get up in 5 or 6 hours and do this all over again. Must
Yeah.
be, did you ever find at times that you were like, I never want to look at food again?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And particularly when we were on the road, they were really long days. And you're right, we had to go out every night. And what happened later, after Emeril Live, we did a show called Emeril Green, which was shot down in Virginia. So we would go for a week at a time, and we would all be at a hotel. And it was like this like little insular group doing this show. And but we were with each other 24/7. But we all knew we had to go out to dinner with Emeril. So what would happen is some of my producers, like, they would start to take turns. I always had to go, but they would always take turns. And so one night one would go, one night the other, just so that we could all catch up on our sleep. And that's the way that we did it. But it it was very challenging.
Tell us about your Nana. How did she impact your
Ah,
life?
my Nana. Now you're gonna get me to cry. Nana was, first of all, the only person in the family who could cook. And she was like the source of unconditional love. She was, she did all the big holidays, Thanksgiving being the biggest. Every year we all look forward to it. And she just had the patience that, my mother's personality and my grandmother's were, you know opposite. My Nana was very calm, very proper, but not in a stuffy way. She would always say things like, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. She was a very gentle woman. And, my brothers and I were real hellions. And in our house, every meal was a nightmare and a screaming. But if my parents were to go away, Nana would take care of us, my grandfather. And we were on our best behavior. We never wanted to upset Nana. I mean, we never fought when she was there. I mean, everything was calm, everything was quiet. And I can only remember her raising her voice once because we got a little out of hand. And we were all so upset that we never did it again.
Oh,
So she sounds like she was a phenomenal woman and a phenomenal cook.
Yeah, she was a great cook. Her apple pie was legendary, absolutely legendary. So, but she did. And what's funny is that we all thought she was this great cook, but when she passed, I got her recipe. She had this little container with all of her recipes in it, and they got food stains on it, whatnot. And she made this blueberry custard pie that I absolutely loved. And I was looking for the recipe, and I finally found it. And all it was mighty fine vanilla pudding in a pie crust with canned blueberries on top. And I thought she slaved for hours on it because that's what she did with her apple pie. But the blueberry custard pie was just so simple. And it was just open the cans and go. So I was a little, but we loved it at the time. So.
And one thing I was thinking about too is like my father, when we got older, like in our teens, he was a decent cook. He wasn't bad, he was good, but he relied heavily on the crock pot. And he was so like thrilled with himself when he got a timer that he could plug the crock pot into and set it and then plug it into the wall. And he would, he didn't have to leave for work till maybe 9 or 8. And he would get up at like 5 in the morning and he'd chop for like an hour and a half, all the celery, all the onions by hand. And he would put everything in the crock pot and set the timer. And then it would cook while he was at work, and he would come home to see it had turned off and, the food was ready. And, and then when he would sit down to eat, like he'd put the butter on and the salt and the pepper. And I remember like my stepmom always yelling, like, come on, your food's going to get cold. I'm half done and you're still like prepping your food. And there was just such like a rhythm to what he had to do to make everything taste good and then to put it on his plate and serve it. And I find that, yeah, I'm like him in the chopping. It takes me hours to chop onions.
Yeah.
And I haven't lost any fingers or anything, but hours
There
to
you
chop
go.
and to like prep. When I read a recipe and like my daughter laughs and it says it's going to take you 15 minutes to prep and 30 minutes to cook, my daughter's like, start now, because an hour and a half later, you're going to be done chopping and it's going to take you an hour and a half to prep and then 30 minutes to cook. So
Right.
we always start in advance. So I guess I kind of got a little bit of that from him, but
Right.
back in that day, that was like the big thing for him was like the crock pot, and plugging it in. And did your grandmother ever, use the crock pot, or your mom, or was that just like a wasn't allowed in the house?
Yeah, it wasn't a thing. That we didn't use a thing. Yeah.
For those who are unfamiliar, can you explain to us what a recipe breakdown is?
Sure. Okay, so when you are doing a cooking show, and if, for example, if you were doing a turkey in TV land, you don't have 4 hours to sit around while a turkey cooks.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out, how are you going to do this for TV? And that's where a recipe breakdown comes in. You have your standard recipe, which the chef will supply to the culinary team and the television team. And that's like any recipe you find in a book, anywhere. And then the culinary producers would take that recipe and literally break it down into timing and elements and ingredients. So the whole process could take a number of days. For example, you need to know what you need to buy. If it needs to, how the shoppers at the network would have to go and, kind of pre-plan when are they going to get all of the ingredients. And some ingredients you need right away, some they'll probably have. And then the culinary team would take what the culinary producers wrote and they literally would map out what we would call acts. Like each hour of television had 6 different acts. So what happens in what act? And you have to kind of keep track so that all the different parts of the recipe get done. So it's a very kind of complicated process in what they do. But to give you an example, one breakdown for the turkey would be, you would actually need 4 turkeys to do the recipe.
Yeah.
The first one, you would kind of season the bird and stuff the bird, or, show how to handle the bird, and then put it in the oven, and then go to commercial break, come back, and then there's, number 2 turkey would already be swapped out in the oven, and then that would be cooked part of the way through. So maybe then you'd baste it, and we'd have to show how to baste that. And then you put it back in the oven. And then when the chef was done after the next commercial break, you bring out the bird, the final bird. He might show how to carve it or whatever. But since he's messed it up from carving it, you then have to have a 4th one, which is the beauty bird, where the camera can take all of the beautiful pictures of it and what we would call the food porn, so that you could kind of use it for promos or whatever you needed it for.
Because I never realized like how much went in to that final product. And sometimes, I'd be so amazed. Like I'd say, wow, it's going in the oven. I'd be excited to see what it looks like when it comes out. And then all of a sudden, 15 minutes later, they're done. And here it is. And I'm thinking, wow, they're so genius. They can cook so fast and they do everything that I never realized that there really is all these steps. And then you have to kind of get ready days in advance to get that perfect shot, because like you said, you can only do it once.
Yeah, that's right. So, and every cooking show pretty much is done like that. And, it's really, those breakdowns are so critical to, the flow of the day. If the breakdown isn't done right, then it really has a domino effect, and not in a good way.
Yeah. Tell us, what was your first trip to Europe like in the winter of 1972?
Yes, well, the one thing, like our parents were, my dad was a contractor, and it took him a number of years before his business started to do well. But the one thing they instilled in us was a love of travel. And when we were little, we'd go to little places in New York. It's where I grew up, and but every year, our family would go on a special ski trip. So it was my uncle and his family and my brothers and I. And this was the first time they said we were going to go to Europe. We were going to go to Zermatt in the Swiss Alps. So it was a big deal. We all had to get passports, and it was really thrilling. And I was 14, I think. Yeah, I was 14 at the time. And my younger cousin was 12, and my brothers were 17 and 20. So, we all, with all our gear and everything, you get on the plane. After the plane, you have to get on a train. I mean, we're throwing the skis in through the windows on the train to get to this little village where we're going. And it was incredible, because not only was it exciting to go to a foreign country, but we were skiing in the Alps, but also the food. The food was unbelievable. I mean, when you ski in the States, you stop for lunch, you have a bowl of chili, you have a hamburger, and you get back out there. Oh no, not in Europe. I mean, they there were pasta lunches, and so many different, whether we were on the Swiss side or it's right near the border of Italy. So once we skied down for lunch into Italy, crossing a border, and we the lunch was probably 2 hours, but we didn't care. I mean, because it was, never had Italian food like that. I mean, my mother, her version of, spaghetti and meatballs was just to, take chopped meat, throw it in boiling water and, make some pasta and open a can of ragu. I mean, that was it. But in Europe, it was, fresh pastas, squid ink sauces, bolognese. I mean, it was unbelievable. So it really, not only was it, a great experience, but it really opened, was my first really, I think, big culinary experience.
What did you find when you were entering what it was like for you entering into a restaurant with Emeril and your whole production team?
Well, it's kind of like Moses coming in and parting the Red Sea. I mean, all the people in the restaurant, all the waiting staff, they just kind of stand at attention. And, whenever you eat with a chef who's known, I mean, it's great because, all the, it's like doctors who treat, family and friends, it's really good to know, someone who's a doctor. And same thing with the chef. I mean, all the other chefs want to impress him. So, you'd always be guaranteed to, to have food come out that you didn't even order because the chef just wanted you to try it. So it was a really good perk to go out to dinner with him.
Do you find that even though you're no longer working with Emeril, some of that clout still holds for you when you go to a restaurant?
Yes and no. Without the business card, not quite as much. It certainly opened a lot of doors. But the one trick that I have found to get good service, and it's simple as anything, is really being a good patron in the sense that have eye contact with your waiter, chat them up a bit, make them feel that they're a person. You will be amazed at how many people just look at a menu and don't even look up at the server. And, it's just human contact, and say, by engaging them, you're saying, I value who you are and what you're doing. And, let's have a good meal. And often my husband and I will get this comment at the end of the meal. They say it was not just that it was a pleasure to serve you, which they probably say to everybody, but they say, no, it really was a pleasure to serve you. And, that's how you get great service. So you don't have to be a VIP necessarily. Doesn't hurt, but there is a way to do it. And I think just appreciating people is really the way to go.
I think so too. I know when I was very young that my grandmother would always take us to this one restaurant in Massachusetts, and they had the most phenomenal little just like rolls that would come out instead of bread. And they had pecans and like maple syrup or something on them. And I mean, I'm sure every time we were coming into the restaurant, the waitress was probably like, oh no, not them again. Because there'd be like 8 of us and they'd bring out like 7 of those every time. So so they'd always say, okay, remember this time you don't get one, but next time we come, you will. And you had to remember, because otherwise my brothers would always say, oh, it wasn't me last week when it wasn't. You go 2 weeks, and you wouldn't get one of those. And so it was like real, being nicer. I think my grandmother and my mom, kind of were overboard on being nice sometimes because they really just wanted to keep the peace with us and hope that, the waitress wasn't going to run away, when we were arguing over the rolls or something. And, I didn't get one. And so, yeah. So, and I think that's important too, because I think a lot of people also too do not realize that waitresses, it doesn't matter how fancy the restaurant is, they're not rolling in the dough. They're not making the big bucks, and they rely a lot on tips. And, sometimes it can get very daunting where, you're not making a lot of tips and you have 5 more hours in your shift or something, and the day is slow, and it doesn't take any time out of anyone's day to say, hey, hi, how are you? And, thank you. And yeah, please, thank you. And I would like, instead of just saying, I'll just have this, and then shoving the menu in her face and not even, looking at her. People, I think, forget that they're not, making a lot of money. They don't get paid big dollars, and they're relying on tips, and, and they also are there for long hours of the day, and they probably do need some kind of human interaction, too. So it's just to be for people to be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
What is it about cooking with Emeril that excites you most?
Cooking with him,
or just watching him cook and everything that he does?
Well, I mean, I think it's his enthusiasm. I mean, it's the real deal. It's very genuine. I mean, the guy thinks about food from the moment he gets up in the morning, and I think he dreams about it at night. So his passion for it is really infectious. And, it wasn't just that I got turned on to it, but the entire crew did. I mean, everyone on the staff became better cooks and got interested into it in cooking because of him. And you couldn't not appreciate his enthusiasm for it. He's a great teacher. And, you know, we really all learned from him. And, you know, he made it cool for guys to cook, I think. And kids got really, we had a lot of kids who would come to the show. I mean, they loved it. So, you know, I think he really deserves a lot of credit for really, you know, kind of bringing good food and good cooking to the masses. You know, you don't have to just open up cans. You know, you really can try new things. And, you know, he really made us, I think he empowered people to feel that they could do it too.
Hmm.
And I can see that because he, in one of your stories, you talked about where they had kind of like a contest, or you know, people had to write in and say, you know, they wanted to be the one that was chosen. And then suddenly somebody was picked, and you went to this town kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I know Emeril was thinking like, oh my, or maybe, you know, thinking, oh my gosh, what are we getting into? And then here comes this little boy who didn't have a word to say, oh, you know. And so
Yeah.
it, you know, that was probably a very challenging time, and you guys worked it out phenomenally, you know, to get the boy to talk and get Emerald. He got right in there and got on that boy's level, and you know, and everything turned out really smooth. But yeah, you kind of have to be able to do that.
Yeah, you have to be able to pivot and, you know, figure out, you know, what, okay, you know, something's not working out the way you thought, you know, maybe there's another way to approach it. And so, you know, you have to be flexible. And Emeril was great at that. I mean, he really could roll with the punches.
Which episode do you consider to be the most groundbreaking?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think, well, from a television perspective, maybe the first cooking concert we did in Grand Park in Chicago. I mean, this was an event in front of 10,000 people, and with performances and singing. And, you know, what cooking show did that? You know, that was, you know, really a highlight. But what you mentioned earlier about sending his food into space,
Yeah.
that was so involved and so crazy a thing to do. It may not have been the best television, but it was the coolest thing we did, which was, you know, working with NASA and literally shooting his food into space, and having and talking to the astronauts, you know, ship to shore, or whatever you call it. That was really thrilling. So I don't think a lot of cooking shows were doing things like that at the time.
And who knew like that, you know, because some of us are not professional chefs like myself, that once you kind of freeze dry that, you packaged it and you sent it out, that once they open it and they kind of warm it up, it might not taste the same as it did, you know, when it was leaving, you know, your cooking station there. So how many times did it actually take before they got the one that said, this is it? You know,
Yeah, it
and they
took months. It took months, because not only do you have to freeze dry the food, but then it has to be rehydrated, and some foods heated or whatnot. And it's a lot of trial and error. And so, you know, we would send a recipe to NASA, they would try it, they'd send it back, we taste it, you know, we'd add the water just like the astronauts would have done. It was a really cool thing to do. But, you know, some dishes lend themselves better than others to freeze drying. So they already knew that, like the NASA lab. So they kind of helped us before we kind of picked what we were going to make. You know, some things, you know, one thing they told us, you know, be careful of crumbs, because crumbs in space is a very bad thing. Crumbs can go anywhere. So, you know, funny little things that you wouldn't think about. So they were really helpful, and it didn't take that many times back and forth, because they sort of knew what kinds of foods would work and would, but it went back and forth a few times.
What prompted them to reach out to you?
Out of the blue, I got a call from the PR person at NASA, Nicole, who I became very good friends with. And she, Nicole Cloutier was her name. And she really was calling on behalf of the lab just to get advice how to make the food tastier and spicier, because who knew? But in space, astronauts lose some of their ability to taste, so it gets diminished in some way. So they wanted to have some tricks up their sleeves for maybe how they could, over flavor things, or kind of increase the flavor so that they would be able to taste it, and have a satisfying sensation. So that was really what the call was about. And then I said to her, well, I'm sure he'd like to help, but what do you think if we send his food up to them? You think that would work? And she was intrigued by the idea, and so the two of us together kind of hatched this plan, and it took us 18 months to pull it off.
Wow.
She had a lot of red tape, I had a lot of red tape, and you just can't throw something up on the shuttle and have it go to the International Space Station just like that. It has to go through a few levels. So she worked magic on her end, and on my end, no one believed that it was going to happen, so no one wanted to help at first. So I had to work my end as well, but we pulled it off.
And that's just an incredible thing. I never knew that, as many times as you go into space and you come back, that kind of sense of taste is diminished. And when you're there, I understand there's a lot of things that they have to do and be cognizant of. And the one thing that's kind of like home is food. And then when you start to kind of lose the tasting of food, it's kind of like, wow,
Yeah, I mean, it's the only kind of joy that they get, really. I mean, the only thing they can do. So, you don't want to, as I say in the book, you don't want a bunch of hangry astronauts, up above you. So they really worked hard to kind of keep them satisfied.
What words of wisdom can you share with our listeners so they too can be fearless in the kitchen?
Good question. Well, it's really simple. First thing you have to do is read the recipe multiple times and give yourself enough time to kind of process what it is that you have to do. Because the way I used to cook before any of this Food Network stuff happened, I would just open a cookbook or do whatever, and I wouldn't necessarily have gathered all the right ingredients. I might not have had them, or sometimes it says marinate overnight, and it's like you're trying to put it on the table tonight, and it's like, whoops. So the simplest thing you can do is study the recipe. Just read it a few times, prep it, go shopping in advance for it, look to see if things are have to be done ahead of time. But if you understand the process and you have all your ingredients, and the other thing is prep your ingredients first, like do all your chopping first, get everything out of the way, just get it all out in front of you, because you don't want to have something on the stove sauteing and then it's like, oh God, I have to cut up another onion or another whatever. So get your mise en place all together, get all your ingredients out, and then when you actually start to cook, it's so much easier and it's a lot more fun, and it'll come together a lot easier. So those are the two key things that I do to this day, and it really can save you a lot of headache.
I think one thing too is to kind of be familiar with the ingredients you're working with, because I saw a recipe somewhere on the internet, and it was like these chicken meatballs with zucchini, like in this curry sauce. And to me, I make the sauce and I make the dishes, and it always feels like there's never enough sauce. So this time, like, I'm going to double the sauce, but still have enough meatballs for we'll have for dinner. I'll take it to work for a day or two, and we'll be good. And so my daughter went out and bought a jar of curry sauce, and it was maybe 3 ounces, maybe a little more than that, this little yellow sauce. And I just thought, and it said like 1 or 2 teaspoons. And I thought, well, I'm doubling the sauce part. So it was like, God, I don't know if I'm even going to have 4 teaspoons of this, or like 4 tablespoons, whatever the amount was. So I used the whole jar of this curry sauce, and we simmered it. We made the whole thing, and my daughter took a bite and she said, I can't eat this. And I was like, why? And she's like, have you tasted it? And I said, no, it was so hot. It it was
Hot sauce, yeah.
inedible. So like, she goes, that's why the jars are so small and why they say
Right.
only use. And I was saying,
A
well,
small
we're
amount, yeah.
doubling the cream, we're doubling this, so 2 tablespoons, right? That's
Ah,
4. So I
yeah.
was like, I don't know if I have enough. So I used the whole jar and I cleaned it out. And then my
Yeah.
dog didn't want to eat it. And I didn't want to waste the food. So I kept taking it to work with like a package of tissues. And people are like, well, why are you eating it if it's that hot? And I'm like, because I don't want to throw it away. But
Yeah.
so you really, I think, have to become familiar with what you're using, because a mistake like that, thank God I wasn't cooking for my family or something. I might have killed
Yeah.
them, you know?
You might have. That could happen.
So it's like, being familiar with when they say only this much, not say, well, I'm going to use a little extra, because
Right.
things like that can be kind of fatal. After 13 years and 1,500 hours of the Food Network, which episode holds the most memories for you?
I Well, there are a lot actually. That's a tough one, but I would say maybe the one we did at the Eastern State Penitentiary, which was a setting for a Halloween special.
Yeah.
It was the creepiest location you could imagine. It's where Al Capone was in prison back in the day, and it was a great, set really to kind of shoot a special on. And it was really fun. It was like a mini horror movie. I got to I studied film in college, and I got to use my little director's hat for that. And it was really fun. And, it was a very different format for us. And it really was like a little mini movie. So that, for me, that was really fun. That was very satisfying.
And now I have to just ask about your husband and
Ah.
How he did with all this, because literally you were gone for days at a time, and then you came home for a bit, and then you were gone again. And how did that affect him with you kind of always being on the road?
Well, absence makes the heart grow fonder. I think, after you're married a long time, I don't think he minded that much, but he often would come. Sometimes he would come when we were on the road, but I think he liked my job more than I did. So, he would, he got all the perks. He didn't have to do any of the work. So I think he loved it, and he really, got into it. I think Bernita has a question.
Yes.
Hi, Karen. It's Dr. Mitchell. Listen, I have a couple of comments, and I also have a couple of questions. So I'm being greedy today. First of all, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
I will be getting a copy. I am excited because I'm a storyteller, so I love that you have stories in the book. So kudos to you for that. Hope we can see your book on mainstream media. I think it sounds like it's a lot of fun in the book, and also information and wisdom. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I was very impressed with the food that you were sending outer space. And I'm thinking, what was the food that you were sending?
It was kind of classic. Emeril was a New Orleans chef, so it was kind of a classic jambalaya and green beans and mashed potatoes. And I think it was a rice pudding.
Oh,
it's
wow.
in the book. Yeah, it's a rice pudding. And they all rehydrated really well.
Wow, I wouldn't have thought that. I thought it would have been something bland with a little bit of flavor, but no, they had like soul food.
Yeah, they did. And actually, the green beans had bacon too. So
no, really?
Oh, yeah, really good.
Okay. And it took 18 months for the whole process for NASA to approve it, right? Why does it take so long? That's like a year and a half, no?
Well, it wasn't so much the food. It was just getting people on board to say, yes, we can do this. Because mostly on the NASA side, because obviously, no one had done it before. And, they had to check everything out. It's NASA. It's serious.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you're a pioneer in that area then. So 2 quick last questions. One, what would you say to someone who's interested in being an executive producer of this kind of show? What kind of skills, gifts, what would it be that they would need? Because it sounds like you really had anyone that's an executive producer has a lot of balls moving at the same time. And so what would you say to someone who's interested in that area?
Well, I think it's really kind of a left brain, right brain job, in the sense that you need the creative skills and talent to, come up with ideas and do and kind of innovate things. But you also need the practical side, where you can literally execute them. So you need the wherewithal, not only to see a creative thing, but how do you make it happen? And then you need organizational skills, because you have to schedule things, you have to budget things, you have to kind of work your team. You need managerial skills, so it's a real broad kind of experience. And and there are good executive producers and there are less good ones, like anything else. But you just have to really, it's like handling a beast, and you have to try to tame it in some way. And you just can't be afraid of that. You just have to kind of go for it.
What a great analogy.
Yeah.
You're a fierce executive producer. That's all I can say. So the very last question, I don't want to monopolize anyone else's questions at this time, but the last question is, being an executive producer, what is your greatest reward, and what is your greatest challenge in doing this work?
Well, as I think I said before, for me, particularly as my career went on, where I got my satisfaction was really mentoring my team, and my staff, so that they felt empowered to do their best work. Because if people don't feel valued, then they're not going to work hard for you. And if they don't have any skin in the game, if they're just following orders, it's really makes the job that much harder. So that to me was very satisfying. I still have people who tell me that, Emeril was the best job they ever worked on, or, the best show they ever worked on. And, I have a lot of my staff have become good friends of mine. And so that means a lot to me. And, the celebrity stuff, after a while you get used to that, and, that's not as big a thrill as you think. But the other aspect that is satisfying is, as I said, making the impossible happen. That's really, at the end of every run of shows, it was always interesting. I literally felt like I was hit by a train, and it would take me a few days to like physically kind of regroup, because you put all your energy and you're just going nonstop, while you're working, and you just can't stop, and you don't until you do stop, and then you fall apart. But that's sort of the pattern that it takes.
And so that would be the challenge, trying to
just to keep the energy up. That, to keep going. That's the challenge.
Wonderful. I'm not going to be greedy, but self-care is important in our organization.
Yes, it is. Yes.
What do you do for self-care?
Well, there's nothing like a good night's sleep, I'll tell you. To get your brain, to kind of come down, that's always been the hardest thing for me. So I really, took a lot of care about my sleep if I could. That was really important to me. And a nice facial doesn't hurt either every now and then.
That's for sure. Thank you, Karen. And I love the title.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great title.
Thank you. There's a story to that. There's a story to that too. Actually, my neighbor's daughter named it. Actually, she made a birthday card for me, and I was learning. Her father and I were working on learning how to do sauces, the mother sauces. So she made a little birthday card, and it was a picture of the two of us, a drawing, and it said "getting sauced" on top. So that's she actually named it.
That is so cool. Love it. Love it. Thank you, Laura. I'm off. Thank you, Karen, for answering those questions.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If anybody else has questions that they'd like to ask, please feel free. The floor is open.
Yes. If you were to do it again, what would you do differently?
Oh, that is a really tough question. What would I do differently? I think I wouldn't take things so much to heart. A lot of things that would happen, when you get negative feedback or people are being difficult, it really bothered me. And, I'd have to pretend that it didn't. And I think, one of the things would be not to take things, too personally.
Wisdom.
Totally agree. I think that is the secret to almost anything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is there
It's
going to be a
hard.
book signing in the metropolitan area?
Yes, this Saturday, if anyone is in New York, at Williams Sonoma at Columbus Circle, I'll be there from 2 to 5, and I'll be signing books, and I'll be doing even a little demo. I'll be making my feeling sorry for myself grilled cheese sandwich. Come on down, make me feel good.
Okay. Okay. I guess I'm in.
And that is a
Grilled
good
cheese, oh my God,
recipe.
yes.
So you have to buy the book in order to get the recipe, because it's in there.
Yes. In order to get the grilled cheese, I'll do anything.
I know, right? I'm with you on that.
I use brie. It's worth it. Very
Oh
good.
boy.
It's
Okay.
great.
Now
It's
you're
great.
really messing with us.
Great.
Will you be coming to New Jersey at any point?
Is Short Hills in New Jersey?
Yes.
Okay. My publicist is trying, maybe. It's a maybe. I'm
maybe.
actually going on a West Coast tour first. I'm going out to California and Napa, Northern California, in 2 weeks, actually. And so when I get back, I'm hoping to do some other signings in the area. So probably another one in Brooklyn, and hopefully, I think my publicist is trying for a Williams Sonoma in Short Hills, and maybe up to New England, and
Got a busy
crossed.
schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Listen,
getting.
I don't want to put you on the spot. However, we are a nonprofit organization. As you know, we serve women who are sexually violated and women who are living with HIV and AIDS. And all of our services are free. And one of our our signature program is our weekend retreat here in New Jersey. And this is rhetorical. You don't have to answer, but just file it away. I'm begging right now.
That's okay. No problem.
Our retreat is in August. So I'm wondering if this is something, and you don't have to answer, Karen. Okay.
Okay.
Is there some way that you think you could come and do a teaching on cooking and maybe make a little dish or something, and on the Saturday of our event, and then we can bring your book and the women can, the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah, let me think. The only thing I'd say is I don't know my August schedule yet, just because my publicist is focused on June and July right now. But if I'm free, I'd be happy to.
Woo! Laura, did you hear that?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Yeah, Karen, you're the best. Well, we know that we're scheduled for the 16th of August through the 18th. Okay. So it's a Friday to Sunday. And God, if you're able to make it, we will, whatever day you're available, we'll just make sure that it happens.
Okay. No, I'll mark it in the calendar so that I know that it's there. And, once August starts to shape up, I'll talk to Laurie about it, and hopefully we can work it out. Where in New Jersey?
Are you familiar with Morristown? It's North Jersey. Well, you probably North Jersey for you. If you're in New York, is more like.
I actually think my cousins live not far from there. I think I know where it is.
Oh, God.
Is it near Red Bank?
No, Red Bank is all the way south at the bottom, close to the end of New Jersey. Was not the end, but it's way south. Morristown is okay.
Then never mind. No, I don't know where it is.
Okay. Well, this is
But
great.
that's
This
fine.
is great.
Yeah.
You know what the word says, you have not because you ask not. And I'm so glad I asked.
That's it. No
Thank you.
problem.
Thank you very
My
much.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Karen, for everything that you've imparted, the wisdom that you've given us, and for your great stories in the book and the insight. And,
Yeah.
you know, like I said, there was a part, you know, was coming towards the end where I was kind of like, wow, I was like, you know, a little sad because I thought we were enjoying this great ride. And it, you know, kind of feel like, oh my gosh, it's ending. And I didn't want the book to end. And then I realized I still had about another 40 pages to go. So I knew it wasn't actually ending. But
Oh, good.
it was a wonderful read, a lot of great stories in there. And our second to last question of the night is, what does the future hold for you?
Well, as I mentioned, I am in the writer phase of my life now. So I really enjoyed this whole process. So my next book is called Getting Steeped, How I Learned the World Really is a Small Place After All. So that's the next one. So that'll keep me busy for a couple of years.
Yeah.
For sure. Is it cooking? Is it around the issue of cooking, or is this
Not
broader?
yes, well, it will take the same format as this book. So there will be recipes, but only because the story that I tell really has a lot to do with food in a different way. It's not about producing food, but it's about discovering food of other countries. So, you know, it's really about, you know, my time living abroad, living and working abroad in Singapore, which happened at a time in my life that I just didn't expect. And it just was an incredible experience. So that's book 2.
Okay, Karen, you know, you really need to do a memoir, right?
Well, exactly.
We've learned a lot about your mom and her cooking. We've learned a lot about your grandma and your Nana, how she was such a wonderful woman. I mean, your story is wrapped in maybe the book too. A memoir would be excellent, I think.
Yeah, well,
have you thought of that?
This is a memoir.
It is.
Yeah, it's not a cookbook. It's a memoir with recipes.
Shame on me.
Yes.
Gotta get it. Okay.
Well, that's okay. It only came out yesterday, so you're not expected to have already read it.
Only me.
Back to you, Laura.
All right. Well, thank you, Karen, again, for all the wisdom that you shared, the beautiful stories in the book. And I recommend everybody run to their Barnes and Nobles or, you know, Goodreads on the internet or somewhere and buy the book, you know, read it. It really is a wonderful read. It's, you know, not at all what you would expect, but it is a really great story and very powerful one at that. And to see a person who here really shaped like food television, the Food Network, and how things, you know, were to go on from there, you know, how it all got its start and what it has, the great thing that it has become today. So thank you very much.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Thank you. Thanks
Karen.
everybody for coming.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Good night.
Thank you,
Good
everyone,
night.
for joining us, and stay tuned. Be on the lookout for our next podcast. And it was a pleasure having everyone join us and everyone being here. So thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.
You
Thank you.
too.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
thank you, Karen.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.